Modernism, Theme and Style. In the previous lecture, we have discussed the representative authors and representative works of modernist literature. In this lecture, we are going to discuss the themes and style of modernist literature. Themes. Fragmentation. Fragmentation is the hallmark of modernist literature. It features prominently in the works of Pound, Eliot, and Joyce, to name but a few. The first half of 20th century was marked by a chaotic moral situation. Scientific theories had gained ground and human beings were losing grip on moral values. The two world wars had claimed countless lives and people had lost faith in religion. Words like brotherhood, sympathy, and fellow feeling had become meaningless. In a situation such as this, the literature which was produced was bound to embody a fragmentary vision. Therefore, all the major modernist writers like Pound, Eliot, Joyce, and Virginia Woolf have depicted the fragmentation of modern world in their works. In order to depict the fragmentation of human mind, these writers employ the technique of stream of consciousness, and in order to establish their link with past, they take a frequent recourse to allusions. The unreal city. Modernism was the first literary movement to take urban life as a given, as a form of experience that was categorically different from any other kind of life. Prufrock, the protagonist from Eliot's poem of the same name, strolls the city aimlessly as a way of life. Modernist writers gravitated to cosmopolitan cities. Still, they were ill at ease in them. London was the first home of Anglo-American modernism. By the 1920s, the focus shifted to Paris and in the 1930s to New York. But no matter what city, the city was almost always the subject of modernist literature. Whatever James Joyce ever wrote was about the vibrant urban life of Dublin. Similarly, in The Wasteland, Eliot describes London as an unreal city to point out the loneliness and lack of meaning city dwellers often feel. Alienation. If city is the master image of modernism, alienation is its master theme. Almost all modernist writing deals with alienation in some form. The primary kind of alienation that modernism depicts is the alienation of one sensitive person from the world. The stream of conscious technique of narration is particularly well suited for this kind of alienation because it enables the readers to explore the inner self of a person and witness the actions of the world outside. Joyce's protagonist Stephen Dedalus is alienated because of his devotion to art and people's cool response towards him. Woolf's heroines are doubly alienated, primarily as individuals and secondly as women. Eliot's narrators, most notably Prufrock, are confronted by an inhospitable world, and for Ezra Pound, it is the world itself that has been alienated by the forces of greed from its historical heritage. Freud. Freud exercised a great influence on modernist writers. He believed that the source of human motivation lay in certain basic urges that were thwarted by the pressures of society. Therefore, he recommended psychoanalysis for the exploration of human mind. Modernist artists were also influenced by Freud's technique of psychoanalysis. They believed that the psyche of the narrator is bound to be affected by unknown forces during the process of narration. Thus, he is never able to capture reality without any kind of bias or alteration. According to the modernists, the narrators should simply attempt to record thoughts. Joyce's first novel, A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, is a case in point. It records the thoughts of Stephen Dedalus from his childhood to boyhood, the presence of the past. Modernist writers looked at the contemporary world as a directionless place, without center or certainty. With the advent of scientific rationalism and the utilitarian thinking of industrialization, 20th century people have also lost touch with the certainties of the past. These past certainties served as a solid foundation for the world. Now the natural organic unity of the past is missing from the world and fragmentation has set in. In Eliot's terms, this phenomenon is called dissociation of sensibility. It shows, on the one hand, a deep dissatisfaction with the contemporary world in which harmony is sadly lacking, and on the other, a nostalgia for the past when poets could successfully fuse thought and emotion together. Pound also wanted to highlight moments in history when a just and aesthetically appreciative society existed. Technology. Technology is conspicuously absent from the modernist writing. Joyce set Ulysses in 1904, before motor cars had become widespread. Eliot and Pound move easily between historical periods but rarely mention the technological advances of the 20th century. Rather, they look back to the classical or medieval or Renaissance periods, fearing that dependence upon machines will deepen their alienation. For example, in the Fire Sermon of the Wasteland, Eliot draws an analogy between a girl and a taxi. This type of comparison evokes negative associations. Style. Narration. Modernist writers employed the stream of consciousness or interior monologue technique in their works to record the thoughts of the narrator. The unpredictable connections that people make between ideas reveal their inner selves. In Ulysses, Leopard Bloom's mind is assailed by the thoughts of his wife's betrayal most of the time. This narrative technique enables the readers to share the narrator's scattered and jumbled experience of the world. Modernist poets such as Ezra Pound or T.S. Eliot, by contrast, did not delve deeply into the individual consciousness. Rather, they attempted to model the fragmented nature of minds and civilization in their narratives. Eliot's The Wasteland has dozens of speakers that succeed each other without warning. The poem opens with the voice of the dead speaking from underground, then shifts quickly to the unattributed voice of a countess, then shifts just as quickly to a loud priestly voice. The effect is a cacophony of voices, a mass of talking, devoid of connection. In Ezra Pound's The Cantos, this array of voices is taken to its logical conclusion. The poet speaks in many different voices, but historical figures speak, artworks speak, ordinary people speak. In this long poem, the poet transcribed letters and included them in the poem. The poet, in this case, is less a writer than a compiler of voices. It is the arrangement of pieces, not the content of each individual piece, that is important. The effect is to decenter the reader. Readers are no longer sure where the poet exists in the poem. Allusion. An allusion is a brief reference to a person, place, thing, idea, or language that is not actually present. Because of modernist theories about the omnipresence of the past, allusions are difficult to avoid in modernist literature. Joyce, Eliot, and Pound, the leaders of the modernist movement in English, included allusions as perhaps the central formal device in their writing. The past is everywhere in the writing of these three, and indeed, this is the case with most of the other modernist writers. But it is in Joyce, Eliot, and Pound that the allusion is particularly important. Indeed, it is impossible to understand their work without understanding their important allusions. Many of Pound's allusions, indeed most of them, are frankly inaccessible. For example, Canto the Eighth reads, "These fragments you have shelved." The allusion is to Eliot's famous line, "These fragments I have showed against my ruins," at the end of The Wasteland. Joyce structured Ulysses to work on numerous levels. All of the mundane events in Bloom's Day correspond to episodes in Homer's epic Odyssey, for instance. But the book also works as a retelling of Irish history, of the growth and development of the human fetus, and of the history of the Catholic Church. Eliot's Wasteland can be read as a collection of allusions or fragments, as he calls them in the last section, appearing in the poem as the Greek seer Tiresias, a pair of working class women in East London, a number of Hindu deities, Dante, and an American singer. These references are not explained, they just appear, and the reader must make what sense of it he or she can. In conclusion, it can be said that modernism evolved as an artistic reaction to dramatic changes in politics, culture, society, and technology during the first half of the 20th century. Modernist writers focused their attention on the sense of alienation prevalent in the modern world and mostly employed the technique of stream of consciousness to reveal that sense of alienation in the pages of their books. Thank you.